This is back with another brand new episode of Pride and Prejudice, Chapter 6. I'm your today's host, Starquark. Today I'll be reading along the Pride and Prejudice, Chapter 6. Without further ado, let's go. The ladies of Lombard soon waited on those of Netherfield. The visit was a return in due form. Miss Burnet's pleasing manners grown on the goodwill of Mr. Hurst and Mrs. Bingley. And though the mother was found to be intolerable, and the younger sister not worth speaking to, a wish of being better acquainted with them was expressed towards the two eldest. By Jane, this attention was received by the greatest pleasure, but Elizabeth still saw superciliousness in their treatment of everybody, hardly excepting even her sister, and could not like this. Though their kindness to Jane, such as if had a value as arising in all probability from the influence of their brother's admiration. It was generally evident, however, that whenever they met, that he did admire her, and to her it was equally evident that Jane was owing to the preference which she had begun to entertain for him from the first, and was in that way to be very much in love. But she considered with pleasure that it was not likely to be discovered by the world in general, since Jane, united with great strength of feeling, a composure of temper, and a uniform cheerfulness of manner, which would guard her from the suspicions of the impertinent. She mentioned that to her friend Mrs. Lucas. "It may perhaps be pleasant," replied Charlotte, "to be able to impose on the public in such a case, but it is sometimes a disadvantage to be so very regarded. If a woman conceals her affection with the same skill from the object of it, she may lose the opportunity of fixing him, and it will then be but poor consolation to believe the world equally in the dark. There's so much of gratitude or vanity in almost every attachment that it is not safe to leave any to itself. We can all begin freely. A slight preference is natural enough, but there are very few of us who have hearts enough to be really in love without encouragement. In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had a better show more affection that she feels. Bingley loves your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her. if she does not help him on. But she does help him on as much as her nature will allow. If I can perceive her regard for him, he must be a simpleton instead, not to discover it too. Remember, Elsa, that he does not know Jane's disposition as you do. But if a woman is partial to a man that does not endeavor to conceal it, he must find it out. Perhaps he must, if he sees enough of her. But though Bingley and Jane met tolerably often, it is never for many hours together. And as they always see each other in a large mist of parties, it is impossible that every moment should be employed in conversing together. Jane should therefore make the most of every half hour in which she can command his attention. When she is secured of him, there will he leisure for falling in love as much as she chooses. Your pain is a good one, replied Elizabeth. Where nothing it is in question but the desire of being well married, and if I were determined to get a rich husband or any husband, I dare say I should adopt it. But these are not Jane's feelings. She is not acting by design. As yet, she cannot even be certain of the degree of her own regard, nor its reasonableness. She has known him only a fortnight. She danced 4 dances with him at Marton. She saw him one morning at his own house, and has seen dine in company with him 4 times. This is not quite enough to make her understand his character. Not as you represented, has she merely dined with him. She might only have discovered whether he had a good appetite. But you must remember that 4 evenings have been also spent together, and 4 evenings may do a great deal. Yes, these 4 evenings have enabled them to ascertain that they both like Vitatum better than commerce. But with respect to any other leading characteristic, I do not imagine that how much that has been unfolded. Well, said Charlotte, I wished Jane success with all my heart. And if she were married to him tomorrow, I should think she had as good a chance of happiness as if she were to be studying his character for a 12-month. Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance. If the dispositions of the parties are ever so well known to each other, or ever so similar beforehand, it does not advance their felicity in the least. They always continue to grow sufficiently, unless afterwards to have their share of vexation. And it is better to know as little as possible of the defects of the person with whom you are to pass your life. You make me laugh, Charlotte, but it isn't sound. You know, it is not sound, and that you never act in that way yourself, occupied in observing Mr. Bentley's attentions to her sister. Elizabeth was far from suspecting that she was herself becoming an object of some interest in the eyes of his friend. Mr. Darcy had at first scarcely allowed her to be pretty. He had looked at her without admiration at the ball, and when they next met, he looked at her only to criticize. But no sooner had he made it clear to himself and his friends that she had hardly a good feature in her face, then he began to find it rendered uncommonly intelligent by the beautiful expression of her dark eyes. To this discovery succeeded some other equally mortifying. Though he had detected with a critical eye more than one failure of a perfect symmetry in her form, he had forced to acknowledge her figure to be light and pleasing, and despite of his asserting that her manners were not those of the fashionable world. He was caught by their eyes, playfulness of this. She was perfectly unward to her. He was only the man who made himself agreeable nowhere, and who had not thought her handsome enough to dance with. He began to wish to know more of her, and as a step towards conversing with her himself attended to her conversation with others, his doing so drew her notice. It was at Sir William Lucas, where a large party was assembled. "What does Mr. Darcy mean?" said she to Charlotte, "by listening to my conversation with Colonel Forster?" "That's a question which Mr. Darcy only can answer, but if he does it any more, I shall certainly let him know that I see what he is about. He has a very satirical eye, and if I don't begin by being impertinent myself, I shall soon grow afraid of him." Oh, his approaching them soon afterwards, that without seeming to have any intention of speaking, Miss Lucas defied her friend to mention such a subject to him, which immediately provoking Elizabeth to do it, she turned to him and said, "Didn't you think, Mr. Darcy, that I expressed myself uncommonly well just now, when I was teasing Colonel Forster to give us a ball at Meryton with great energy? But it's a subject which always makes a lady energetic. You are served on us. It will be her turn soon to be teased," said Miss Lucas. "I am going to open the instrument, Elsa, and you know what follows. You are a very strange creature by way of a friend, always wanting me to play and sing before anybody and everyone. If my vanity had taken a musical turn, you would have been invaluable. But as it is, I would really rather not sit down before those who must be in the habit of hearing the very best performers." On Miss Lucas persevering, however, she added, "Very well, if it must be so, it must," and gravely glancing at Miss Darcy, "There is a fine old saying which everybody here is, of course, familiar with. Keep your breath to cool your porridge, and I shall keep mine to swell my song. Her performance was pleasing, though by no means capital. After a song or two, and before she could reply to the entreaties of several that she would sing again, she was eagerly succeeded at the instrument by her sister Mary, who, having, in consequence of it being the only plain one in the family, worked hard for knowledge and accomplishments, who was always impatient for display. Mary had neither a genius nor taste, and though vanity had given her application, it had given her likewise a pedantic air and conceited manner, which would have injured a high degree of excellence. Then she had reached it. Elizabeth, easy and unaffected, had been listened to with much more pleasure, though not playing half so well, and Mary, at the end of a long concerto, was glad to purchase the praise and gratitude by Scotch and Irish airs. At the request of her younger sisters, with some of the Lucases and the 2 or 3 officers joined eagerly in dancing at one end of the room. Mr. Darcy stood near them in silence and indignation as such a mode of passing the evening to the exclusion of all conversation, and was too much engrossed by his own thoughts to perceive that Sir William Lucas was his neighbor till Sir William thus began. That's all for part 1. Please subscribe me for part 2.